Okay, everybody. Well, look, we're hopefully waiting for a few more of those out on the campaign stalls to connect. But I'd like to start by, welcoming everybody again to this live call. It's obviously part of the day's events, the day of action. We've got stalls and events taking place in various areas today, some of whom are going to be able to join us and report and explain why they're out campaigning. The event, the day of action, as I said just now to those who were with us earlier, we're using the hashtag Safe Return to School, 2 as a number, Safe Return to School. It's been organised by the Education Solidarity Network. It's a network of NEU districts who want to make sure that trade unions and trade unionists are campaigning to defend members, to defend our school students and education, and of course to defend the community as a whole at this time of an ongoing pandemic. My own name is up there on the screen. It's Martin Powell-Davies. I'm presently teaching up here in the Northwest where I'm based, had various roles within the trade union movement over the years, now back in the classroom. We hope that we can hear from a range of people, from parents, from school staff, possibly from media colleagues as well. Just be aware they may be on the call today, but most of all to hear from events around the country and to hear from campaigners about what they think needs to be done to make sure that we get a safe return to school in September. As I said, there'll be a chance for some questions at the end. I've got a colleague who's looking at anybody who wants to raise their hand to make a point for the questions at the end, but the call's mainly going to be to hear from those who are out campaigning. And just while we wait for everybody to set up, I just wanted to make clear, I'm sure it's obvious to everybody who knows it, that some people will be accusing, and have indeed in some of the tabloids already, accused us of wanting to stop children being educated. And of course, that's the very opposite. We care about children's welfare. We want them to return to school, but on a safe basis, not recklessly. It's not in anyone's interests if children fear that their return has led to a further surge, as worried about the health and safety of their parents and relatives as well. We know that COVID does not stop at the school gates. The schools provide an indoor environment of adults and young people packed together with, under the DfE regulations, no face coverings, often poor ventilation, exactly the kind of environment that could cause a further surge. And the government has made a complete mess of this year's exam grading. I think very few people have got much confidence that they're any better prepared for the school return in September. So that's why today's events have been called, to try and mobilise and to alert people for safety. Now, I can see on screen already we've got the first person ready to come in and report, and that's going to be James Kerr from Blackheath, who's taking part in events alongside other Lewisham NEU members. So hopefully, James, you can be unmuted. There you go, James. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Martin. I'm here with Duncan and Eleanor from Lewisham NEU. We've just walked up from Lewisham Shopping Centre. We're now on Blackheath, probably the windiest place in London on the windiest day for a long while. So hopefully you'll be able to hear what we've got to say. We're going to, in a moment, join Greenwich NEU for a short in-person rally, but we wanted to share a little bit about what we have been doing today. So we've been in Lewisham Shopping Centre. We've been leafleting and petitioning around some of our core demands, and as you would expect, we have come across a lot of school workers out shopping on a Friday morning, and very, very similar themes with all of those conversations. A lot of confusion, a lot of concern about what September is going to look like. And in many cases, a kind of not really an understanding of what's been put in place in their school by now. And obviously we stressed the point that one of the reasons for that is that many head teachers are still working at the moment on the plans that have been thrust upon them by government with very little support, very little financial support, and very little thought that has been put into how things can be scaled up in September. So one thing that went down really well with a couple of parents that we spoke to who had children actually in schools just across the border in Greenwich was about a slower phased return in September, that rather than all children coming back to school within a matter of a couple of days, that actually the government approach should have been to scale up over a much longer period of time, potentially, using the first half term really as a way of getting students back into school safely, and spreading out that phased return over a number of weeks rather than days, so that the virus can be monitored and the kind of systems that are necessary to keep schools safe can be put in place and can be applied rigorously before more students are then added in. But one of the other things that I wanted to touch on a little bit, because I've got my test in my bag, is about the question of testing. And we're not talking here about SATs or GCSEs or A-levels, we're talking about COVID testing. And what we've argued is that there needs to be routine and regular testing on site in schools. At the moment, this situation we've got where if you're symptomatic, you can request a test, or you're expected to do that as an individual. That isn't going to ultimately enable us to really track what's happening with the virus in our school communities. Whereas on-site testing on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, while that wouldn't give you a 100% hit rate, it would enable you to better track what is happening with the virus in your school community. And we stress this point about community because we spoke to a number of people who said, well, I don't really have children at school, but of course, regardless of whether you have children at school or not, then if schools are points of transmission for the virus, it's going to have a knock-on effect across our inner city community. So it went down really well. We had a good response. We're planning to meet with one of the councillors in charge of the Lewisham COVID plan next week to talk through the demands that we're raising and encouraging the local authority to take a more hands-on approach in the running of the return to school in September. So kind of positive first start to that, and we're going to build on that. And what the thing that we've stressed, and Sheila Caffrey in her contribution on BBC Radio Bristol this morning made this really good point, is actually we're the ones trying to avoid a second lockdown and school closures, because the government approach is actually setting up a chaotic situation in the autumn term with the virus. What we're arguing for is actually what we think is responsible, is considered and proportionate, but it requires funding and it requires government action. We're going to keep pushing them on that. So good luck to everyone around the country, and thanks for calling me in, and hopefully at some point add to the discussion maybe a bit later on. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Hopefully we'll be going back to Blackheath to hear from Greenwich as well, but right on cue, I'm going to invite in Jane from Coventry. As you can see, as she can explain, their stall isn't till later, so she's not out in the wind, she's at home. But Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, my name's Jane Nellist, and I'm a member of Coventry National Education Union, and obviously Education Solidarity Network I've been involved with for a long time. And I think, there are lots of worries in Coventry. I think one of the big issues for schools in our country is that we have the smallest classrooms and the largest class sizes. And that presents us with a real difficulty about what the government is planning. So I absolutely endorse all of the demands that that we're setting out today, and we'll be going out into the shopping centre in Coventry later on. The reason why we arranged it a bit later was there was to be a students' protest about the A-level and GCSE results, but of course as they have had a victory with that, that's been cancelled today. But we're out at 3 o'clock this afternoon in Coventry city centre, and I'm sure, as James has reported, we'll be getting the same response from parents and the community, because I know, talking to parents, and that they are very worried, very concerned, because daily there are reports of incidences of the virus rising in our communities. Coventry is part of a huge conurbation, the West Midlands, and you know, we're seeing some quite big increases in cases. I think one of the other issues that we have to factor in is the concern that a lot of our students don't go to their local schools, and for secondary schools they rely on transport, on buses, and that's going to present lots of problems as well. So there are, you know, huge issues about getting children back to school. We certainly absolutely want our pupils back in school, but it has to be done safely. And I'm afraid that if you look at this government's record, all the things that they've promised us have just not materialised. It's been a right mess from the start. So what I think the issues around a phased return are sensible, and that would ensure we could take it a step at a time and make sure that our risk assessments, the risk assessments that schools are putting in place, actually work. I think the other issue as well for our communities is that where there are cases of the virus and people have to isolate, they need to ensure that their incomes are guaranteed. And if we had that in place, I think that would ensure even more safety for our schools, for our students, for our teachers and school staff, and for our communities. So I think there's a lot to talk to people about this afternoon, and you know, this is the start really of the campaign. I think we need to make sure that there are more regular stalls over the next couple of weeks to make sure that we reach as many people as possible and talk to them and build the campaign to make sure that we have a safe return to schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Well, I was just getting worried that our live report from East London wasn't happening, but I can see the good people of Newham, and hopefully we can hear from Newham as well. Over to you, Newham, if you can unmute yourself. Is that Louise? Yeah. Hello, Newham.
Oh, yeah, Newham.
We have the live.
Sorry, sir.
Anybody you can speak to us from Newham?
Our leaflets have just all blown away.
Are you able to, while you're chasing your leaflets, look, I might come back to you. Is Louise available? This is real live reporting, as you can see. We did warn you about the wind. Is there anybody there? Lindsay, I'm going to go to Lindsay in Leicester. We might try and come back to Newham when they've rescued their leaflets. Hi, Lindsay.
Hiya, I hope you can hear me okay.
That's fine.
We're on quite a busy bit of road, so bear with me. Yeah, I'm Lindsay. I'm the Socialist Party branch secretary in Leicester and also the campaign secretary for the Safety First campaign. And we're here today to ask the council to commit to no fines for parents who are worried and genuinely worried about the health and safety of themselves, education workers, and the wider community. So we're asking Leicester City Council, Leicester County Council to commit not to fine. I think parents are in an absolutely unbearably difficult position, having to make horrible decisions about children going back to school, especially with the lack of masks and so on, which is incredibly worrying. So we're hoping that we'll get some leadership and from the local council, Labour Council, to say that our schools shouldn't open unless they're safe unless there's proper social distancing and children are allowed to be a metre away from each other. So I'll give you just a little bit of a shot of our belly. There we go. There's a vacuum of us. All right.
Brilliant. Thank you,
okay?
Lindsay.
I can't hear you, Martin. I'm sorry.
No problem. Okay, we knew I'm just going to try Newham one more time to see if they can hear us. If not, just to warn you, Sue, in Medway, I'm going to come to you shortly. Let's see if we can get Louise on the phone here from Newham. Louise, are you there?
Yeah. Hello, this is a quick message from Louise Capara in Newham in High Street North. All our leaflets are blowing away. We're giving them out and the passers-by are helping us. Our message is we want a safe return to school. We've got the leaflet translated in the community languages as well, and we've got some petitions. I'm going to leave you now, but solidarity with everyone.
Thank you. Well, they've obviously found the way to give out the leaflets in community languages to the community by just letting the wind do the job. Hopefully someone's going to pick them up as well. Sue, I'm next going to go to Sue, who's over in Medway. Over to you, Sue. Do unmute.
Excellent. Thank you, Martin. It's good to see you, Martin.
Hi there.
I bring solidarity. I'm Sue Berry. I bring solidarity greetings from Medway, the Medway towns, and we're hoping to do our street activity at the weekend, the coming weekend. I've been asked to speak today, or I'm going to address my points about vulnerable staff in schools. So the government and the mainstream media have framed the return to school at the start of September solely about getting the pupils back, getting pupils back to learning, talking about this is what the pupils need. Pupils have lost out on so much learning, pupils have been left behind. All those sorts of arguments have come out in the mainstream media and from the government. But narrative from the government is, and the narrative at the same time from the government is us teachers that are holding that process back, and we have to fight back against that, and we have to bring the whole point, bring it into the conversation, the idea about safety of teachers, teaching staff, and education workers. The government have shown a blatant disregard for the safety of vulnerable education workers. As Jane said earlier on in her contribution, we've got the largest classrooms in Western Europe, with the largest classes with the smallest classrooms. So there's a real problem there as far as safety is concerned and as far as staff are concerned. We also in primary know that social distancing is virtually impossible to do that in primary schools. In secondary schools it may be a little bit more appropriate or more suitable, or pupils may find it easier and classroom setups may find it easier, but in a primary classroom social distancing is difficult, and I know in many schools they're not even making that something that they're going to focus in on. We know that viral load poses a real threat to our BAME colleagues, as well as staff who have been shielding with underlying health conditions, and staff who live with vulnerable family members. In September, we'll be on the front line in classrooms and other school buildings with a very real threat of a very high viral load. And we only have to look at other sectors of workers to know how dangerous that is. If we look at the number of deaths of transport workers, for example, bus drivers trapped in buses with a high viral load, hospital staff with inadequate PPE, sent in to treat patients and therefore receiving a high viral load. And incidentally, my daughter is a nurse on an ICU unit in our local hospital. ICU nurses are much better protected, even though they are the nurses, the staff right at the front line with the COVID patients. It's the health staff that are not used to working in those environments or have had a lack of PPE that have had the high viral load. Other areas where there's high viral load are care homes and retail, so supermarket staff, all working in enclosed environments for protracted periods of time, which is exactly what's going to happen when we go back in September. This is why one of our key demands for our group, for what we're doing today, is for the protection of at-risk staff and students as part of our plan to keep our schools safe in September. Thank you, and solidarity, comrades.
Thank you very much, Sue, and apologies. I think I may have spoken over you at one point, but I thought I was muted. And apologies for some offensive visitors that have, or one at least that's joined our chat and's been removed. Unfortunately, whenever we do these live Zoom events, that's always a risk we take. But glad hopefully that's been dealt with. Well, look, thanks very much, Sue, for some very important points that you raised there. The next place that we're going to is Bristol. We know that Sheila has already been on the local radio this morning and hopefully can join us from Bristol now. Sheila, are you with us? Hello, Sheila.
Hello, can you hear us?
Just about. Shout nice and loud.
Okay, I am generally quite good at shouting really loud. I'm afraid my video's not working, although hopefully one of the other people who are here will try and work it out while I am shouting to you. So we're in the middle of doing our action now. It's quite a rainy time in Bristol, but we've been handing out postcards and speaking to lots of people here. I'm afraid it doesn't look like it is going to allow us to do our camera, but I've got various different people from the NEU here who would like to share different points with you. So first, Cheryl.
Hi, I'm a secondary school teacher here in Bristol, and I, like everyone else here, I'm fed up with the callous government telling us that it's an all or nothing approach. They're successfully peddling the lie that we're either back to school back as we were or we're not, and the schools are completely shut and nobody gets an education. But that's just not true. We all know that's not true. They've had 5+ months to sort out the test and trace, to sort out social distancing within schools, to make it safe for the vulnerable, but they just haven't wanted to do it. So we're angry. We're out here making sure the rest of the people in Bristol know about that as well, and we're having a good day. Let's see if anybody else would like to speak.
Hello, my name is Sauda. I am a supply teacher, and we're concerned about what's going to happen with supply teachers going back in September, and safety and regards to if we get sick, how we're going to get paid. Yeah, we're grateful for the furlough, but yeah, more needs to be done to support supply teachers. And also the A-level fiasco, it's been disgusting. So we want the government to not let it happen next year to students.
Hi, my name's Tyrone. I'm a TA in a primary school. And yeah, basically one of the things I'm most concerned about is kind of continued protection for not just at-risk staff, like for any households that might be at risk or anything like that. And how it's important that we think of this not only as like keeping individual staff members safe, but it's important about keeping the community safe as a whole. So that's why I'm here talking to people and getting them to sign our petition. Thanks.
So I think that's about it, Martin, for us from Bristol. So we're going to keep going with handing out the flyers and hopefully managing to put the pressure on the local authority in Bristol to look at their plans. One of the things that we're very keen on is making sure that the track and trace is brought in-house to actually make sure that children and communities are aware of the safety too. But thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks everyone in Bristol and all those who contributed. I'm going to go shortly to another area, but just I'm going to abuse my position here because I'm also a supply teacher. And obviously there are a lot of us who are on furlough who are very concerned about what the position is going to be come September. And it is just worth saying, I saw that on Independent Sage, they were making the point quite correctly that if the government funded extra staffing, then there would be the staffing available to be able to have the smaller class sizes that we're looking for and able to allow distancing. Perhaps rather naively made the call for people who've retired to come back into work, like the call went out in the NHS. I think all of us who are supply teachers would make the point that actually there are many people who've retired that may not want to go back to the classroom for good reason, but there are many supply teachers and supply TAs as well who are desperate for an income. So don't forget the supply staff in all of this as well. So sorry for adding my personal point, but I'm next going to go, hopefully, Sean, you're at the ready there in Worcester.
Martin, this is Sean McCauley from the Education Solidarity Network and Worcestershire National Education Union in a wet and windy Worcester city centre at this point. We're going to start our campaign stall at around 1 o'clock. So I'm in the process of actually getting everything sorted and chasing after things that are flying away in the wind. Our intention is to put the 8 demands that we've drawn up out to members of the public in the postcards and in leaflets. We hope to be asking people to sign petitions, and it's in addition to the submission that we made yesterday, or the National Education Union in Worcestershire made to the local authority to take up those demands. They are considering those at present. And we have a full members meeting also on Tuesday next week. And the idea really is to encourage our members and our reps in schools to take those demands and put them to their own heads, to win local agreements over those demands, to make their schools safer from the guidelines that the government, well, the wholly inadequate guidelines that the government has put forward. And to be honest, those demands, they're not unreasonable demands in any way, shape or form. If I, looking around at all of the shops in Worcester city centre here, if I were to walk into any of them, I'd have to wear a face covering, and once I was in there, I'd find that most of the shop staff would either be wearing face visors or face coverings themselves, and all that we're asking for is for school environments to be treated in exactly the same way as indoor environments in the rest of society. And obviously in most of the shops here, there's the capacity to social distance, whereas in a class of 30, you don't have that opportunity. At the moment, the local authority is considering the issue of whether to allow face coverings or to actually recommend or encourage face coverings on school transport. It's already obligatory, say, on public transport. But the question has to be asked, well, 30 children on a bus with face coverings on, what is the difference from the 30 children who've just come from a classroom in terms of their ability to wear face coverings? And the government's recommendation is that face coverings are not worn, and that's one of our key demands at this point. And I would imagine that's going to be one of the issues that people will want to raise here in Worcester with us. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks a lot, Sean. And obviously that's another important demand, and clearly that contradiction between other indoor environments and schools is something that I think school staff and parents are clear about. That's something that needs to be addressed. We're next going right down to the southwest, hopefully. I'm looking for Plymouth and EU. What have you, Alex, are you there? What have you labelled yourself? I've lost Alex. Alex Moore, I found you. Alex? Hello, Alex.
Hello, hello,
hello, Alex. Sorry, we lost you there.
Okay, all right. Just to say a few words on behalf of support staff workers in particular, because that's the role I play within the union on the National Council for that section. I mean, we have to remember that schools, of course, aren't just about teachers. They're about cleaning staff, they're about kitchen staff, they're about caretakers, They're about people who work in offices and so on, in order to make sure that everything runs. And I think kitchen staff in particular are likely to be very exposed, because they don't necessarily just stand behind the counter and serve. Sometimes they go out, they're involved in cleaning down tables and so on, as are others, you know, TAs and teachers too in some schools. And of course, it's at lunchtimes when you're likely to get the biggest conglomeration of people and students all at the same time in one space. So I think we've come up with some very sensible demands through the, you know, the ESN to make schools as safe as possible when we reopen in September. I'm going to leave it, just leave it at that, if you don't mind. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you, Alex. So we've heard, if not seen, we've certainly heard from a few different high streets around the country. We're going to finish in rather leafier parts that Lewisham and Greenwich have chosen for their rally away from their high streets. I'm going to go over to Kirsty, who's also there in Blackheath, who's going to make the closing contribution from at least our live reports. Over to you, Kirsty.
Hiya, can you everyone hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, Kirsty. Shout now. Nice and loud. I know you can.
So yeah, I feel like it might be blown off any minute now. It's incredibly windy up here. So this morning, teachers and parents met both in the centre and down in Greenwich in Woolwich. And we've had a really good response from particularly parents. We've handed out quite a few of those little cute postcards. And now we're on the heath, and as you can see, we're just standing around making and the key thing people talked about is we all want to go back. We desperately want our students back in our classroom. We know that some families are struggling, and we just know that children need to be prepared, but currently not safe. And that's despite all the incredible work that our head teachers have been doing over the summer. And you know, it's the view of many, many reps in Greenwich, and I hope this is echoed throughout the country, that it's not enough to say we want schools to be reopened. We've got to have key measures in place for that to be guaranteed that we're minimising risk. The key things that we're campaigning for in Greenwich is we need smaller class sizes. In my school, we have some of our maths classes and English classes, 33, 34 students. It should never be like that anyway. You cannot social distance. Reducing class sizes is a key demand. The thing is, we know that needs to be resourced, and that's where the government has to start putting the money, the funds, the resources in place to make it a reality. If we are opening schools, there's been an interesting debate about masks. My own view, and it's shared by many of our reps, is that they should now be mandatory, just like they are in other closed spaces. That doesn't mean that, you know, those individuals that struggle to wear masks for all sorts of reasons should be forced, but we need to shift the culture dramatically. And I would appeal to everybody who's listening to this call, wear a mask on your first day back. Even if you're not feeling vulnerable, that's not the point. We have to show by example, and we have to show our students how serious this is, and that we all act together, then we're in a much stronger position to protect those that are vulnerable in our community. The question of vulnerability is really important. You know, we are currently now receiving the calls because people are beginning to panic, and who's panicking? It's precisely those members of staff who were shielding because they were informed until the 1st of August that it was unsafe for them to go back to work, and now suddenly, apparently it's safe. We're not convinced, and therefore, as an absolute minimum, we are opening schools. Those staff should be offered alternatives, safe alternatives. Working from home, working in a situation where you can maintain and sustain social distancing, that cannot be in a classroom if you've got, you know, 20, 30 odd children. I think a key issue as well is something that will be raised here, which is this whole kind of threat to fine parents. This is absolutely insane that those family members who are really anxious about not just their children going back, but they may have vulnerable members in their family. Many of our children live in intergenerational families in Greenwich. The idea that you're going to bully and emotionally and financially blackmail families into sending their children back when they know it's not safe is an absolute travesty. and we should be making sure that every council draws that threat immediately, and that those families that have to stay at home are given all the resources that those children can still make progress, their confidence while they're staying at home. The other thing that's come to light is, you know, with all this talk of blended learning, there's been very little done to really put it in place, and that's why we must have a phased return, because that will give teachers and support staff the opportunity to really get it up and running. Look at what's gone on in Scotland. Only last week, there was a positive case, and the whole bubble had to go into quarantine for 14 days. In my school, that's 210 children. We currently haven't really got the high quality blended learning in place, but if that happens, which is inevitable, those children are going to miss out. So these are just some of the things that we've got to fight for. And I think my parting remark is, it's not enough just to write to MPs, while that is vital. It's not enough even just to write to our executive members and get them to start, you know, negotiating with the government. We have to mobilise our collective strength. I argued back in April on the executive that what we needed was to prepare for a national ballot that was prepared to take strike action across the whole of our union if we couldn't get a negotiated, agreed return to school based on a national agreement. And if we had started that process back in April, particularly around all the fantastic work we did on the 5 tests, we'd be in a much stronger position to say to the government, if you don't sort this out, then we will be going on strike. And the reason why I think we should still, you know, build for that momentum is I've just been reading about what's going on in Detroit today. Okay? The members there were balloted in Detroit, 97% of them voted yes, and that has put the equivalent of the executive in a really strong position to negotiate precisely the things that we want. Regular testing, smaller class sizes, resources for blended learning, and the track and trace, so that if we are in a situation, very quickly isolate those individuals that need care, and that therefore transmissions minimize. So I also encourage everybody to start having those discussions in your school about how we need a national campaign of collective action, not just a social media campaign. I hope you could have heard me okay on this windy day, and thanks very much for listening. We've got some parents here as well, if they might be interested in saying a few words. But over to you, Martin.
Okay. Because it's so windy from you, we'll probably move on. We got most of what you said, though, Kirsty. Thank you very much, and to all those who are with you. And I'd like to thank everybody who's contributed. Obviously, we've chosen a particularly windy day. We haven't gone to everywhere that's organising today or on other days. As I said at the beginning, those of you may have heard, though I had a warning that today wouldn't have been a good day to do a stall up here in Cumbria. So we were out in the streets of Carlisle on Wednesday, and I know that others are out in other areas over the weekend as well. I mean, just if there is anybody, I can see Jen who'd like to make a point who's raised a hand. We have got a little bit of time. In particular, if there's anybody who wants to ask questions, if there's any members of the media on the call, we don't want to go much further, but Jen, I can see that you've raised your hand there. Jen, let's hear from you.
Hello, I'll be very quick. I'm a parent from the Boycott Return to Unsafe Schools campaign, also known as Brutus Parents United. So we've got nearly 8,000 members now from all across Britain. So we've got Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland in our group as well. We have been running a petition on change.org, which I just wanted to let you know about in case people haven't seen it, which is about the fines for parents. And that's hit 100,000 signatures today. So if possible, if you'd be able to share it in your networks, we would really, really appreciate that. Martin, I can perhaps get the link to you if you can send us an email. Our email address is boycottunsafeschools@gmail.com. And the key word there is unsafe. rather than boycott. But the petition is about, you know, making sure that people aren't fined for not sending their children into an unsafe environment. And currently, as a lot of you have covered, you know, the school environment does breach the 3 C's: avoid enclosed spaces, avoid crowded places, avoid prolonged contact. You know, wear PPE where appropriate. None of this is being legislated to happen in schools. We know that the virus is airborne, and speaking personally, you know, I stand absolutely in solidarity, shoulder to shoulder with teachers and all school staff at all levels, and me trying to reduce the numbers of children in school by getting the fines mitigated is about making sure that school is a safer environment with more space for everybody who has to attend. But at the end of the day, and as others have said, the government have had 6 months to sort this mess out. They could have facilitated some remote learning of some kind by now, but haven't done. But I do know that the Department of Education are trying to get some remote learning together, because they have emailed parents and have been interviewing parents one-to-one over this month, at the beginning of this month. So I'm sure that there will be something that will come out from the Department of Education about that, because we got the email sent to us. So take care, everybody, and all the best. And, you know, all of us just have to do our absolute best to support each other where we can, and be mindful also of how each other's doing. So we care about how worried all of you are going into work in September, and just best wishes. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jen. I mean, obviously, whereas we are largely a union-based campaign here as Education Solidarity Network. Obviously, we're very much, as school workers, we're all about supporting our students and our communities and parents. Obviously, Jen's campaign, and I'm sure she puts the link, we've been very much working alongside a parent-led campaign, and you know, you can find them on Facebook. Obviously, you can find Education Solidarity Network on Facebook as well, and we'll continue to work together. I know, understandably, the campaign was a little concerned about supporting public protests, but I hope the parents will also realise that, you know, we've tried hard to make sure, certainly when we were in Carlisle, wearing face masks, keeping the distance, sanitising pens and so on, that were being put on the petition. And just, you know, if you do go to the Education Solidarity Network page, obviously many of you may have seen the material, but if you've come across us and haven't yet seen the material, oh, you won't be able to see it behind my screen. In fact, you can probably see the demands through me rather than the actual petition I'm holding up. If I hold it up, there they appear through me. But I mean, our petitions and leaflets, I mean, they raise exactly the points that Jen has raised. That clearly we believe that there is going to be a need for smaller class sizes and therefore blended learning. But that therefore means to be real consultation, both with staff and unions, but also with parents, about, you know, who needs to have the real priority for in-school learning, and who doesn't, rather that being imposed by outside. Books and IT resources to be made available, obviously no fines, and obviously that also allows a situation where both staff and parents and students who feel that they or their relatives at risk can also carry out their work at home. I mean, the other key points, just to reiterate very quickly as we finish, which I think everybody has talked about already: smaller class sizes to allow physical distancing. You know, wider opening should really only be considered when we're absolutely sure and we can see what the effects of school opening on infection rates are. And obviously where infection rates are high, and there are a number of cities and towns in England that are already well over the rate that in other countries there would be a full lockdown. And obviously cities like Leicester, for example, that have already been through a lockdown. Nobody wants to be into a lockdown, but actually opening schools in the way that it's being suggested only threatens for that lockdown to widen or to continue rather than looking after everybody's safety. We've talked about face coverings, certainly community test and trace, one that actually works. And as people have said, I heard Andy Burnham making the point from Manchester, that of course, if you ask people to test and trace, but those people don't know if they're going to be guaranteed full pay if they're isolating, then they're hardly going to be coming forward to give their mates contact details. And that's something that we very much put forward to Cumbria County Council in the work that we did in Carlisle on Wednesday. And last but not least, you know, we believe that unions have got to use their collective strength. You know, last term, the NEU in particular showed that by standing firm that it could make the government have to think again. And we think that that needs to be done again very soon for September. I know that the NEU executive met last week. We understand that more is coming out from the NEU. Obviously, we look forward to hearing, and we hope that the NEU will be echoing the kind of points that people have been making today and campaigning on today. So I'd just like to thank everybody who's joined us. I hope this was useful for everybody. I hope you got a bit of a flavour, apart from the weather across England, of the weather, but also the work that people have been doing and continuing to campaign. I'd urge everybody to continue that campaign. Get involved with your local union, with your local campaigns. Let's get out. Let's write to our local press. Let's sign the petitions, the online petition that Jen has talked about, and let's make sure that we do get a return to school, but a safe return to school in the best interest of our students, our staff, and our whole communities. Thank you very much for everybody who's out campaigning today, and thank you very much for your time. All the best to everybody. Goodbye.